and welcome to the National Book Festival. My name is Ann Holmes from the Library of Congress. Unfortunately, Anne Druyan was unable to make it to today's Q&A, but I am thrilled to be here with Leland Melvin, author of Chasing Space, an astronaut story of grit, grace, and second chances, and Jonathan Eller, director of the Center for Ray Bradbury Studies, and the author of multiple books about the life of Bradbury, including Ray Bradbury, The Life of Fiction, Becoming Ray Bradbury, and Ray Bradbury Unbound. If you'd like to see their presentation at the festival, which includes Ann Druyan, you can do so on the science stage. The title of their session is The Ray Bradbury Effect, in which they discuss the impact of Ray Bradbury's writing on their work and lives. Welcome, Leland and Jonathan. It's good to have you here.
Great to be here, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne.
So for our audience members, please start asking questions, which I will then read to our special guests today. While folks are writing their questions, I just wanted to kick things off by asking you both about the effect of Ray Bradbury's work on your own work and lives. When did you first become acquainted with Ray Bradbury's work?
You want to go first, Jonathan, or?
Okay, all righty. 1962, as a schoolboy, I found a copy of The Golden Apples of the Sun with that title story of the magical trip that Bradbury envisioned of scientists going to the moon to scoop up magic golden apples of fusion to bring it back to Earth to give us a new kind of Promethean fire, a new form of energy. That was the beginning for me. And then later in the Air Force when I met him, and then after that as a college professor, I studied him quite a bit. And my own publications as a writer and as a scholar have turned almost exclusively to Ray Bradbury.
That's fantastic, Jonathan. I read the Martian Chronicles. It was probably about maybe 15 years ago, and it was this, incredible science fiction fantasy that was layered with so much texture and streams. And Ray was so creative. I mean, he wrote in a way that had this beautiful imagination about future worlds. And as an astronaut, we go through the details of getting everything done just right. And sometimes I think we forget about the arts being part of what we do as explorers. And I've always talked about, from STEM education to STEAM education, because the arts are so important in helping us see the possibilities of us working together in a future on maybe another planet, or maybe going past our solar system if we can get some warp drive going. But I think he was just such an empathetic writer and so creative that just inspired me so much.
Beth asks if you could talk about your personal journey from sports to space to writing and music and more.
No problem. Hi, Beth. I had parents who really inspired me to be a complete student. I mean, they had me playing sports, they had me taking piano lessons and clarinet lessons, and they always exposed me to different things. And also my mom, when I was very young, she read to me two books that are still impactful to me today. The Little Engine That Could, I Think I Can, which as a little kid let me know that I could do anything. I just had to believe in it, and I could pull this bigger train over the mountaintop as a little engine. And then also Curious George. And Curious George was, this book that showed me that you always need a man or woman in the yellow hat, someone who has your back. Because if you get in trouble, if you do something you're not supposed to do, those people can help you get out of that situation. And so those were very formative. And as I played sports, as I did math and science, I always believed that I could do anything that I tried. And, so I was drafted to play in the NFL for a little while, and I pulled a hamstring. But, I went to another team, but I started graduate school in material science engineering, and then went to work for NASA. And at NASA, a friend of mine said, "You'd be a great astronaut." And I just laughed. I mean, I didn't want to be an astronaut, but he said, "No, you'd be great." And I didn't fill the application out. But another friend of Jonathan and mine, Charlie Camarda, he filled the application out. He got in when I didn't apply. And I said to myself, if that knucklehead can get in, I can get in too. So I applied the next selection and I got into the astronaut program and flew in 2008 and 2009 to the space station. So I think Jonathan, Charlie was influential in both of our lives in some ways. But I think that whole premise of I think I can, and having someone who has your back has been something that's led me through, having success in different areas and knowing that you can do it.
Thank you so much. Leland, there's sort of a follow-up question to that, which is how do you use music and photography, and you can talk here too about Ray Bradbury's influence to inspire the younger generation to explore STEM or STEAM. I know as you like to include the A in there.
Yeah, and I think, one of the really important things about anything that our kids are learning is that it needs to be inclusive of all things, because some kids are visual learners, some kids, people learn in different ways, and we need to find ways to unlock what's in kids' heads and find out what they're interested in, what they love. Because if they love something, they will do it. And so if we're trying to force everyone into a STEM curriculum, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and we leave out the A for the arts, which is critical to design and building and creating, then we've lost a whole group of kids that could possibly be great writers, great contributors, but also be great scientists too. And my music helped me with my math. I mean, really, when you're playing these notes, they're overtones, there's physics all layered into the music that you're playing. So if you understand physics and math, you understand music. And when I was in space on my first mission, Quincy Jones interviewed me and said the two true absolutes are math and music. Because if you know math, you really know music. And I think we need to let kids know, and Jonathan, you know this, I mean, the creativity of just living a full life on this planet involves everything that you can potentially do. And I think that's what helped me sometimes by going back to the music or with the math and how they were kind of interconnected.
Absolutely. The ancient philosophers said the unexamined life is not worth living.
Right.
And in our session, you talked about how, to have a purpose-driven life, we need the imagination working in concert with the other technical things you described.
Right. Right.
Well, thanks to you both. Jonathan, I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about the origins of the Center for Ray Bradbury Studies.
Okay, that's a long topic, but I'm getting pretty good at making it a fairly short discussion. You never expect the events to change your life. I know Leland in his book talks quite a bit about the unexpected and how you work those things in your life. For me, it was meeting Ray Bradbury as a major in the Air Force. I was teaching at the Air Force Academy in the last years of my Air Force career. When he was assigned to me and my wife, Debbie, for a week during a science fiction conference that colleagues of mine put on at the Air Force Academy, a very wonderful science fiction conference. And that's where our relationship began. Eventually, I did a lot of projects, some with his longtime bibliographer, Don Albright, and together we did some limited editions of Ray's works. But primarily, I would go out to the house once or twice a year, along with Don, to visit with Ray. And Ray was very interested in that young writer he had once been, because you have to remember that his career lasts for 7 decades as a professional writer. And after the 1960s, after he gets into his 40s, from then on, he's looking back at that young writer he had been, and how did he write his work? How did he evolve his work? Because he often would rework his stories to create books like The Martian Chronicles or Dandelion Wine. And that was my doctoral expertise, was in the evolution of texts. So we began to work together. And finally, after his passing, the family and Don Albright arranged for everything in the household to come. And we pulled a 53-foot Mayflower moving van out of his Los Angeles home and brought it to the Center for Ray Bradbury Studies, where we're still in the process of organizing all of these wonderfully complicated files, because he was a person who had ideas constantly, and his files reflected that kind of reactive, hard to follow organization. And I think our people are going to be pulling all that stuff together out of his files for decades to come.
Nice.
That's fascinating. Thank you so much. We have another question for you from Carrie, who asks, I would love to hear Dr. Eller talk about how NASA brought Ray Bradbury in when he was not a scientist to consult. Maybe explain why they wanted him there, how he felt about it.
Oh, that's a good question. It's good to hear from Carrie. And I would, you go back to the golden apples of the sun for a second, because that story is scientifically ridiculous. How can you put a crew in a ship at 1 degree above absolute zero to keep them from dying in the 5 to 10,000 degree heat of the sun to bring back golden apples? It has no scientific validity whatsoever. It's the idea. And that story helped inspire countless astronauts, astrophysicists, planetary geologists, astronauts, aerospace engineers. And they were attracted to him because he had the dream. And in their lifetimes, and in Leland's lifetime, in his career with NASA, and now past it as an educator, those dreams became our dreams somewhere along the line in our lives. And so it was just natural for NASA to see him as a talisman, almost as a good luck charm. And that was so important, I think, for him being selected to testify for President Reagan's Commission on Space and President George W. Bush's commission in 2005. He spoke there too. And you get a sense of his magic by the way he talks. I'm just going to give you a quick quote, and it sort of answers Carrie's question. Ray said, they said, why go to space with the budget the way it is? And Ray said, why? Because life wants to exist, wants to survive, wants to be free of the conflicts of Earth, even as America, when it was created, was running away from the conflicts of Europe. We're going into space to be free of the politics and conflicts of the various nations and to become one new nation on the planet Mars. Nothing is more exciting to our children. And he closed by saying the children, knowing that their future is in space, will say to their parents, do it.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
So, Leland, this question is for you from Ishmael. For someone who wants to become an astronaut, what fields should they pursue?
Great question, Ishmael. I think that you should pursue the career that you love. And if that career matches up with, science or engineering and, because I think you have to, go to the NASA website and look up, the careers that you can be for a NASA astronaut, but it's science, engineering, medical doctor, those are that's kind of the big broad category. But find one of those things in that, if you love doing that, and then, apply yourself, become excellent in some, one of those fields, and then you need 3 years of work experience. But I think that the biggest thing is with this, the new way of doing space, besides being a NASA astronaut, you could be an astronaut for Blue Origin, for SpaceX, for Virgin Galactic, and get to space without having to do your science and engineering. There are going to be opportunities for people that are writers, that are musicians, that, get to space and be inspired and bring back even more creativity from getting that orbital perspective. That when we look at the planet, this picture I took here of the planet Earth over Argentina, Chile, and Peru, those are the Andes Mountains, and that thin blue line right there is kind of over there, is our atmosphere. And so you see these incredible things, and you would come back and write and compose and, and just bring and share that information back to more people to inspire them. Just what, Ray Bradbury did in his writings and his way of living, he, and Jonathan, maybe you can add to this. I mean, his way of life was just to share the impossible, and make it possible. And I think if, you think about things like that you want to learn about, you can be an astronaut. And I know that there is a someone who purchased 6 seats on the rocket for Jeff Bezos, the Blue Origin rocket, that they're going to give to people that aren't scientists and engineers, so that they can be inspired. And so those kinds of things are happening out there. But the NASA route is science or engineering, and then doing something with that in a professional setting, and then applying to the astronaut corps.
Yes, and Ray was so honored to even stand among the astronauts sometimes. When he addressed the first, second, and third groups of astronauts in 1967 as a guest at the Houston Space Flight Center, as it used to be called, the Johnson Space Flight Center, he saw, when he was introduced, he was in the back of the room, and the astronauts, many of them turned around and made eye contact with him and gave him the wink. And afterwards they said, because he was writing articles for Life magazine, "We're glad to have you on the team." And that's when Ray knew that although he would never go to space, some of his dreams and visions would go to space with those generations of astronauts, and with the generations right down through Leland's generation in the astronaut corps, and now beyond Leland with the younger astronauts there today.
Right.
Great, thank you. So here are a couple fun questions. A lot of folks have upvoted this question, and I suppose both of you can answer it. At this particular time, would you rather be in space?
Jonathan?
I would rather have a surround sound IMAX image of that grandeur that astronauts like Leland have photographed, like you see behind him there. But 20 years in the Air Force taught me that I'm not very good orienting in vehicles. So I would say I'd like to be there through proxy.
But you get used to it. The body figures it out, Jonathan, once you get up there.
Okay.
I think I'm where I'm supposed to be now, so that I can bring the perspective that I was able to get and blessed to get in space on 2 missions back to planet Earth, so that we can have a perspective while we're going through these pandemics and all of this social unrest, but to bring some calm to this, and to say that, together we solve these problems. In space, if we didn't work together, we would perish. And I think that we need to bring that here, because this is a spaceship Earth that we're on. It has a life support system, it has ecosystems, there's all these things, just like a spaceship. And, to survive on this, we're going to have to get along, or we're going to perish. And so I want to be here to help with inspiring that next generation to take my place, and to take Ray Bradbury's place, and, and help inspire even more people to have a human civilization working together.
Thank you both so much for those thoughtful responses. Leland, we have a question from Emily. What role does or did literature play in your career as an engineer and astronaut?
Oh my goodness. I read all the time. I mean, I read more, before getting into the astronaut corps, because I had so much training and stuff to do, but I was still reading. It was just a little bit less. But as Jonathan said about what Ray has given to the universe, this ability to communicate this fantasy, these things that have not been achieved yet. But as we, as explorers, are trying to achieve it, in real time, it gives you that blueprint of ways to do it. And, when conflict comes up, how do you resolve conflict? How do people work together? Talking about, the isms, racism, sexism, all these things that are happening, and that happens in space too. And you want to shut all that down so that you work as a team together. And I think it's just so important that we have a balanced life. We have the technical side as astronauts, we have the creative side, we love to, in space, we have space smorgasbords where we have these meals and everyone comes together and shares their food from all over the world, and we're like a family. And I think that's what literature does. It it exposes you to so many things that from your room, from your house, from your favorite chair, and lets you go on these journeys to allow you to maybe go on those journeys in the real world, and not just fantasy.
Thank you so much. Jonathan, we have a question for you that a bunch of people have upvoted. They want to know what the buttons on your lapel are.
Well, I spent 20 years of my life in uniforms, and you learn to read the semiotic of people's ribbons. So I have continued that habit a little bit with these pins. Ray gave me the top one, which is Mars Global Surveyor, which was as Leland knows, that was the Mariner 9 in 1971 gave you the first photos of Mars, but the Global Surveyor in the mid 90s, man, that was the one. That was the one that really has continued to take a lot of pictures. And then that's just the little planet Mars. You can get anything in a porcelain pin these days. So there you go. I'm happy wearing them.
Thank you so much.
And I want to add one other quick thing. Jonathan reminded me that the Phoenix rover in 2008 on the Mars polar caps had the Martian Chronicles on board, along with other science fiction pieces. Jonathan?
That's right. And we have Ray's personal duplicate disc in the Bradbury Center.
Nice.
Thank you both. Leland, this question is for you, and goes back a little bit to what you were talking about earlier about studying STEAM and STEM. Teenagers are living during this pandemic while contemplating their futures. What inspirational words can you pass on to them to continue to stay motivated to learn STEAM coursework and pursue their dreams, specifically teenagers of color?
Mm-hmm. I am my heart has been heavy a lot lately, but I always know that what we're going through now is temporal. It's a finite amount of time, and we can choose one of two things. We can stay down, depressed, and go to another place, or we can be that light, and try to be uplifting. And for me, I've been playing the piano more. I've been walking my dogs more. I've been cooking more. I've been using this as a chance to grow in different ways that I haven't necessarily had the time to do before. I've been reading more. And so finding out internally inside of you, what is it that really motivates you and inspires you? And what is the thing that you want to do to make a contribution to society? What brings you joy? Try to hone those things, do those things, and find out if it's STEM, if it's the A with the arts and STEAM, try to figure out how to weave those things together so that when we come out of this and there's a vaccine and when we go forward, that you're bringing your best self forward to help others and yourself go rise and go to whatever level you want to. And I think of, 400 years we've had the slavery. We had a woman named Harriet Tubman who even during oppression and slavery was able to escape, come back, bring more people to freedom, and then lead scouts and armies. And so under such dire conditions, she was able to do some incredible things. And I think we can do anything if we put our mind to it and believe in it. And I think that's what, Ray did in his writings. He believed in it, and he did it, and he wrote it, and inspired people like myself to go to space when I didn't even think about going to space.
Yes, indeed. Ray observed in 1969 for Apollo 11 landing, in an interview with Mike Wallace, he said, the real war we should be fighting, the real conflict should be with the cosmos, should be with space, because space doesn't give a darn about us.
Exactly.
We have to make our way. And, Leland's been there and has been one cabin wall and atmospheric pressure away from annihilation.
Right.
And that's really the war we should be fighting.
Yeah. And to add to that, Jonathan, when I was interviewing to become an astronaut, after the interview, we had a social, and John Young walked up to me. John Young walked on the moon. He flew the first space shuttle flight. And he said to me, Leland, once we stop exploring as a civilization, we will falter. We have to continue to explore. And whether it's in space, the oceans, it's explore relationships with people that don't talk like you, that don't eat the same food you, maybe wear different headdresses. This is all about exploration, and it brings us together. And space is an incredible place to explore, you know.
Thank you both. We have another question for Leland from another person named Leland,
Hey, Leland.
who says, "Hello, I'm in school and I was wondering how you entertained yourself in your downtime in space and when working on tough science problems."
Yeah. The first one, looking out the window, you go around the planet every 90 minutes. You see a sunrise and a sunset every 45 minutes. And I was listening to Sade while having dinner, looking out the window at my hometown. So you really get entertained by just looking at the grandeur and mastery of the planet. It's just such a stunning and beautiful place. And then doing math homework, I always do the even problems, I do the odd problems, I do all the problems, because usually the odd problems, if you're doing the even ones, are on the test. So you can make your grades better if you do all the problems. And I usually listen to music while I'm doing math problems.
Thank you for that. We are almost out of time, sadly. So we have time, I think, for one or maybe two more questions. This question is for both of you. It's from Mira. And Mira asks, do you think science writing should get more place in school reading curriculums? And then a separate question, which is, what do you think of Ray Bradbury's Illustrated Man?
Jonathan, you hear both of those.
Okay. Well, the Illustrated Man is what Ray himself would call super fascinating. When he was really moved by something or wrote, and he always wrote about things he loved. That whole concept was super fascinating to him. A tattooed man who was never able to work as a tattooed man in the circus because everybody around him would see that the tattoos, if you stared at them long enough, would start to tell stories, and they would start to tell the future. It was well before that kind of art became fairly widespread in American culture. So he sort of was a foreseer of that particular aesthetic, coming from other lands very popularly into America. But he also used it to weave 18 stories into a story collection called The Illustrated Man. Each story is emerging from one of those tattoos. So visual writer, very visual writer. His words are meant to be spoken as much as to be read silently. And that's a natural fit with the whole world of tattoos.
And science writing is a must. It inspires us, it motivates us. And I'm working on a graphic novel now, a 3-series graphic novel for kids to look at them going to space. So it's really important.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. And unfortunately, we are out of time. So thank you, Leland and Jonathan, for sharing your time with us so generously. For our audience, again, we've been speaking with Leland Melvin, author of Chasing Space, an astronaut's story of grit, grace, and second chances, and Jonathan Eller, director of the Center for Ray Bradbury Studies and the author of multiple books about the life of Bradbury.